Where are you going?
North Carolina, 3-2-1.
Welcome back to the Triple Threat Podcast. My name is Ishan Cheth. Alongside me, as always, is William Ezel. And today we have our second installment of the running back rankings. We've moved into the top 20, and we have 19 through 16 today. We have a Pro Bowler in here. We have a very established former Pro Bowler in here. And we have two younger guys that are pretty exciting, too. So before we get into the rankings, make sure to like, subscribe, leave your thoughts and comments below, and stay tuned for more positional rankings and some other NFL and NBA content on the channel, and then obviously on the website, triplethreatpodcast.com too. So let's get started with number 19, Ezekiel Elliott. And he, as a player, and Dallas as a team, has been struggling. And how much do you attribute his lack of success to, Dallas's poor line, Mike McCarthy's not great coaching, and the offense just having an overall slump?
I contribute a lot of that to his overall success this season, but I feel like we've been able to see his decline for the past couple of years. I think his usage is catching up to him. Something like Le'Veon Bell, I guess you could say, but I guess it's harder to tell with him because he's been in so many different schemes. But I know I'm going to get a lot of hate from Dallas fans for having him so low. I might not. They might have turned on him. I'm not sure where Dallas fans' current temperature is on Ezekiel Elliott. He's tied third in first down, so he's still an effective runner, and he's fifth most in attempts, so still been able to be a solid power back throughout the season. But he's lost a lot of his explosion and speed, which made him such a great player. With the lack of breakaway speed, he's no longer able to get the max out of play. If he has 50 yards on the table in a run, he'll maybe get 10 of those. He's no longer able to break away and just be explosive. He's 18th in defensive yards above replacement. So that's just average. He hasn't been a solid running back. He's just been kind of there. Let me look up where that ranks him in terms of all running backs, because I don't think that's anything spectacular. Because defensive yards above replacement, that also factors in how many times you've gotten the ball. Because if you only gotten the ball if you only rushed the ball 100 yards, you're not going to have a very high defensive yards above replacement because you haven't had the ball. For someone who's fifth in tackles, being 18th defensive yards above replacement is really, really poor. 84 yards above replacement for someone who's rushed the ball so much. That's really disappointing. A DVOA of negative 0.8, so he's been a below average. He hasn't been average for this offense. DVOA really looks at offensive performance, so he's been below average for this offense. He has a 6.5 broken tackle percentage, which is just really poor. So you look at that and you say, wow, he's no longer able to make the first guy miss. He's no longer able to get the most out of a play. And he's really benefited in his early career from having a brilliant offensive line. He's 10th worst in yards before contact per attempt. And that just shows he's just not very effective. He's PFS 46 running back, so I'm not the only one who thinks he's been overrated. He's got a negative DVOA, as I mentioned, compared to Pollard has a 15% DVOA, which is a massive difference, just exemplifying what a younger guy with more explosion, more speed, more dynamism can do for an offense. And it shows how scheme has not been the issue for him, because someone else in the same scheme can have a lot more effective offense, even though he's not getting the same production. So look at Pollard. I think Pollard is a glaring symbol that Zeke is just not having a good season. He's a negative 7 receiving DVOA, so he's not been good in the receiving game either. Against Washington Gray's defensive front, he's at 77 yards in 2 games. He has been very ineffective against some of the great offensive lines. We'll give him credit against the Rams, 22 carries, 96 yards for 4.3 yards per carry. But against Washington, just really been poor. 10 carries, 3.2 yards per carry in the second game. In the first game, 12 carries, 45 yards, 3.7 yards per carry. Not been very effective, but for being able to have a power role, 230 attempts is really impressive, almost 1,000 yards again this season. 5 touchdowns is a bit underwhelming for someone who has so many rushing attempts. And then he's had a huge fumbling problem this season. I think there was a stretch
Yes,
where he
he
had a
has.
bunch of fumbles. So I
That
think he's got
Falcons game.
six fumbles on the year, and
Yeah,
they've all been lost.
he had like 2 or 3 in the Falcons game. They were just struggling just in general.
He's only
But
had one recovered, so he's got 7 total
yeah.
fumbles, 6 lost.
But Zeke is currently locked up on a big 6-year, $90 million contract. Do you think that what kind of impact does this have on the team's payroll going forward? If CeeDee Lamb does break out and Dak wants more money, how do you see this playing out?
It's going to be really crippling for this team's cap situation because, as you mentioned, Dak Prescott, if they want to retain him, it's going to be 30 million at least, and having a running back getting paid in the 15 million range for having below average production compared to advanced metrics, you look at that and say, who else can I have come behind this great offensive line and be successful? Damian Harris could easily do it, and I probably would have Damian Harris over Ezekiel Elliott, but I know I'd get a lot of slander for that. But I think that you have to look at what you want to do with this team. Someone in the comments section mentioned trading for a guy like Deshaun Watson, who would be incredible in the system. But to do that, you need cap flexibility. Maybe you can get. I know Bill O'Brien's gone, but who knows? Maybe they want Ezekiel Elliott on the team. They might want another overpriced running back on that set in that team. So you never know. Houston might make another dumb decision. But
How would
I
that make? I don't know. It's Houston.
it's
It doesn't
Houston.
have to make logical sense.
But I think that you look at all the current rumors going around, Jets being a current trade destination makes sense. A lot of cap flexibility for that team. No good running back in that system. I think Zeke could make a lot of sense there. I think that Zeke would it'd be a big step down from going from Dallas to the Jets. But I think that that's a team that can build. They've got good receiver potential. That has some decent offensive line potential. And they've got a top pick. They can use in a quarterback, or they can use an offensive lineman and protect Sam Darnold and Zeke if they were trade for him. I think that wouldn't be the worst option for the Jets or Dallas. I think both of them would win from that trade. Probably Dallas more so just getting the cap flexibility to re-sign Dak Prescott or to bring in a great quarterback. So I think he's been slightly overrated for a while now. And I think this season he's proved to be quite ineffective at times, not able to carry an offense like he was able to in his rookie season.
Yeah, I think that Dallas just as a whole has been pretty underwhelming. And I think that also a lot of that kind of goes to their coaching. Mike McCarthy has not been the best. So moving on to number 18, we have Ronald Jones with second. And he's kind of broken out, and he has established himself as the number one running back in Tampa above Fournette. What are your thoughts on Ronald?
He's kind of similar in terms of the metrics to Melvin Gordon, a great runner, a very subpar receiving back, which I found quite surprising. So he's eighth in defensive yards per replacement, second in yards after contact, 0 fumbles, really impressive stuff. What Tampa Bay's, when they've been their most effective as an offense, it's been through establishing a run game and getting that to take the pressure off the defense so they can have more longer developing routes, which is a staple of Bruce Arians' offense. So having him being able to be an effective runner up the middle with good yards after contact has been really impressive for them. I don't think they've been utilizing him as much as they should. 14th in DVOA. If you haven't heard before, DVOA is defensive value above replacement. It's weighing in defensive strength of schedule and determining a player's impact on an offense, how much better they would do over an average level player. He's got the worst receiving DVOA by a mile at negative 57%, which is just really
And
surprising, I found.
yeah, and DYAR. He's
So,
the worst there too.
what do you think about Ronald Jones Jr.? Because I feel like at first I saw his running stats. I was like, oh, maybe I should have him higher on my list. Should I have him lower because how poor his receiving grade has been? Should someone like CEH, Ezekiel Elliott, Cam Akers, Damian Harris be higher?
I think that rushing wise, he's done very well for the Tampa Bay team, but I think that this team would be so much better, especially given that you already have Fournette. If Ronald Jones was a little bit more potent in the receiving game, and I think having him in this tier of players from Harris all the way down to himself is about right. And I think that you can move some of these players around, and there'd be an argument for it. So yes, you could move him lower. But I'm just thinking like how good this offense would be, especially with Brady, if Jones could be a more established receiver, because the other guys that are ranked so low in these receiving stats aren't even that close to him, and it's Melvin Gordon who is sixth in PFF rushing, and Derrick Henry who's just I don't think we really need to talk about how good Derrick Henry is rushing the ball and how we know that receiving isn't his forte. So I think that Jones I think this is an accurate placement for him, and that I'd really like to see him develop as a receiver, or I'd like to see, Tampa Bay go out and find a better receiving back while Jones's value is still pretty high.
Yeah, I think they had that in Keyshawn Vaughn. But you look at Brady's most successful running backs, James White, a great receiving back. I think they need someone like that in the system. But to have a Leonard Fournette and Ronald are kind of buying for or fighting for the same role, which is kind of not the best fit for an offense having two similar type rushing only running backs. I'd argue that Leonard Fournette's probably a better receiver at this point in his career. But I think that you just have to look at this, look at success rate, look at how they're doing, and then determine how much you want to use each one. Look at their usage rates of each one. But I think I probably have Ronald Jones a bit too high as of right now because I think receiving is a big part of the running back game. So if I were to replace it, I'd probably put him like below a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Set around maybe 21 between Hilaire and Akers, or 22 between Akers and Harris.
Yeah, I don't want to discredit his running ability, but if I was to weigh a guy down like Melvin Gordon for his receiving ability, I think it's probably fair that I do it to Ronald Jones too. So if I were to redo it, I'd probably have around low 20s. Right now, I have him in high teens at 18.
Yeah. So moving on to 17, we have J.K. Dobbins, our next rookie on the list. I know his sample size isn't the largest, but how has he been doing in Baltimore?
He's been growing into his role since Mark Ingram's kind of fallen out of the team after the COVID situation and a couple of injuries. He's 10th in defensive yards above replacement. If you haven't heard us mention that before, that's just saying how many yards you would get, how many weighted yards you'd get above a replacement level player. So he's been really, really good in the rushing sense. Fourth in DVOA, defensive back per replacement. Second in success rate among these 33. Sixth in yards per attempt. So he's been really effective as a runner in the system. And it's a system that's pretty easy to thrive in. You look at guys like Gus Edwards and Mark Ingram have been really successful in the system. But J.K. Dobbins has been an effective runner, and I don't think that we should discredit what he's done at all because he's been really effective in the running game, and he's grown into his role on this team. And I think that's one impressive thing that he's done is he's been able to progressively increase his role, been able to handle an increased workload. I think that's just something that's impressive that he's done.
Yeah, I think that he is a very good fit in this team. And I think that, would you say that he is the number one running back going forward?
I'd say he is. He's got the most potential of anyone on this team. You look at guys like Gus Edwards, who's probably thriving a bit more in the advanced metrics than J.K. Dobbins is. Not to say that J.K. Dobbins isn't, but just Gus Edwards has been really effective in that offense. But you look at what J.K. Dobbins can do, his versatility, his receiving ability. He's shown it all in college. He's showing it in the NFL. Maybe lesser extent in the receiving game, but still a competent pass catcher. He is by far his most talent, and he's producing at an effective level. So if I'm Baltimore, I'm happy with the guy that I drafted.
Yeah. So moving on to 16, probably the biggest hot take of the list, and the only Pro Bowl running back outside of the top 10. Why do you have Josh Jacobs so low?
Dude, Josh Jacobs has been so overrated. Oh,
Just inefficient.
Wow. Inefficient is the definition. Yeah. So let's go into the advanced metrics a little bit because this is really where he does not shine. This is where he is garbage. He is dead last.
Exposed in these advanced metrics.
Dead last in defensive yards above replacement. That is dismal for someone who has that many attempts. Fourth last in DVOA. That is really not effective. He's tied fifth in broken tackles, but you have to remember he's on incredibly high attempts, so it's not the best broken tackle percentage. His workload has remained the same, but his yards after contact went from 2.8 last year to 1.9. For someone who's a power back, a workload back, 1.9 yards after contact is dismal. He's not making the first man miss. He's not getting any type of separation. And when you look at plays, you watch him on offense, he gets stopped like 90% of the time. This is not a stat. This is just an eye test kind of thing. For a 1 to 3 yard play, way too often. He's not effective as a runner. You see him way too often just get stonewalled at the line of scrimmage, not being efficient, not making the first time miss, not pushing the pile or gaining any extra yards. He's just kind of taking the bare minimum of what the defense gives him, and he's just been really ineffective. I want to pull up his game by game stats because I think they tell a full story. 3.8 yards per attempt. That is really, really poor. I think that ranks him one of the lowest in the league. Let me pull up where that would rank him because I think that's really, really just dismal. That is 8th worst in the league behind guys like Josh Kelly, Benny Snell. If you look at guys on the list, there's only 2 guys worse than him, Todd Gurley and Joe Mixon. So for someone getting 258 carries a game, really ineffective. One thing he is great at is goal line, 10 touchdowns on the season. He's really great on 3rd and 1 or 3rd and goal on the 1 yard line. That's where it's really, really efficient. But he just hasn't been able to be an effective runner against some bad. There's only like good yards per game or yards per attempt game. Denver, not a great defensive line because of all the injuries they've had. New England, another good game there. Look against what happened in New Orleans. He had a good game against New Orleans, but 27 carries, 88 yards, 3.2 yards per attempt against a good defense and had a quote-unquote good game. He got pretty much nothing. Like, he's just got a ton of stats because he has been used so often. And I think that you're kind of seeing that late in the season. His snap count has been progressively going down from 78 to start the season to 50% last game. He's being used less and less because I think John Gruden's figuring out that he just hasn't been an effective runner. And when I'm looking at what I want as a running back, I want consistent yards to be able to set up the 2nd and manageable, 3rd and manageable. And he hasn't been able to do that because if you rush him, you're going to be put in a 2nd and long situation more often than not. And that just seems really surprising to me. You look at his success rate, I think it's 51%. So it's not awful, but it's not good.
Yeah, it's in the bottom half or maybe bottom quarter of the eligible players. And yeah, Josh Jacobs, a high volume, low efficiency, but the volume pads up his stats a lot. And when you're on that Pro Bowl voting website, they give you the basic stats, just yards, touchdowns, and like fumbles, and maybe yards per carry. No one really looks any further, and his kind of name recognition helps a lot with that. But I think that there are a lot more deserving Pro Bowl players. We'll get to them once we reach the top 10, but I am not as high on Josh Jacobs like you as most people are. And I think that the advanced stats really expose him as just a high volume, low efficiency guy. And there are a lot of guys like, I don't know, just throwing a name out, like maybe Ronald Jones, for example, that could thrive and put similar stats up with the usage that Josh Jacobs was getting. So that concludes our running back rankings. We had Ezekiel Elliott at 19, Ronald Jones at 18, J.K. Dobbins at 17, and Josh Jacobs at 16. And that really does it for this second installment of our running back rankings. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave your thoughts and comments below. I expect a couple dislikes from Raiders fans, or even Dallas fans for that matter. And remember, check out all of our content on the Triple Threat Podcast website. I know that I'll have an article about the Golden State Warriors and them peaking soon. And I know will do a few NFL articles coming out, I think, anytime this week or next week. So be sure to stick around for that. We have a lot of content coming up. And have a happy holidays and a good new year.